Thank you. Thank you very much for the invitation. It's a great challenge to be part of this panel. To add to the previous presentation, what do we have what are we expecting in the medium and long term? So in the next 15 minutes, I'll try to answer this question. That is, what could we expect with production and exports of wheat in Argentina in the next few years? But before addressing the future, I'd like to say a few things about the past. We are aware of what happened in the last seasons in Argentina, and this is a set of estimates of the grains exchange from Buenos Aires, the production and planted areas, planted surfaces. And here what we can see are two main periods. First one is characterized by a decrease of the planted area, 3.7 on an annual basis, that led to low productions, 10 million tons compared to what we obtained in the 80s, back in the 80s. Then there is a period of 4 seasons, and there is an increase at a rate of 10.8. That is, in 4 seasons, we recovered the whole lost area in the 15 previous seasons. And this is due to the technological investments. And now we have a record of production in this new campaign. The key role here is the planted area, the land that is compared to the previous seasons. And this expansion of wheat, because wheat is the crop that has expanded a great deal across the country. You can see on the map the 2015, 2016, the 2019, 2020. We can see how the wheat crops are really expanding across the country. Which have been the reasons for this recovery? The return of wheat. Well, without a doubt, the elimination of taxes, that has been a determining factor. Domestic prices increase, are comparable to international prices, so farmers are betting on this crop. But we have other issues to consider that allow this crop to consolidate as part of the strategies and Argentinian crop systems. Among them, sustainability and best practices, and Córdoba knows a great deal about that. This because the wheat plays a key role in crop rotation. Some the control of weeds and double crops as opposed to a single crop, so we can take advantage of the land, capital, and water. Technological innovations that have been brought about and have been adopted by the farmers in the last 4 seasons, and the possibility making this crop help this crop become a financial bridge, so to speak. So all of this enables wheat to play such a key role. This is 18% of the seeded area, and this also explains the 7.5 market share. What to expect in the future, in the next 10 years? Are we going to sustain this growth rate, which would be the growing factors of production in the next 10 years? Yield, the area. What is the role that Argentina is going to play in the next 10 years towards 2028? And we're going to use specific projections used by different agencies in Argentina and in the United States. And to develop these projections, first thing we do is to set some scenarios, considering different scenarios, and then we use impact simulation tools in the long term, and then we analyze the results. We draw conclusions so we can have some strategies for the future. Which are the scenarios we set? First, the baseline scenario. We call it baseline. This is a scenario that assumes or supposes that trends will remain the same for in the next years. This is an important scenario. This is kind of the reference to compare this with alternative scenarios. Which are the alternative scenarios we choose to show today? Well, these scenarios consider what we think are the two main factors that would explain future growth. First, logistics and infrastructure. And to do this, we create a scenario where we suppose or we expect improvements in logistics, and the other, the incorporation of technologies. And for this, we choose two scenarios to close the gaps. For example, farmers reaching better yields. The other one, a bit more ambitious, but this is just a theoretical exercise that allows us to draw some conclusions about the potential of Argentina. This is why we call it potential, that closes the gap between average yields and the potential yield of the crop. Let us describe some of the assumptions in more depth. Well, logistics, for example, what we presuppose, what we assume is a modeling or a logistic chain where Argentina is making all of the necessary investments to reduce logistic costs compared to the most efficient countries in the world, for example, Australia and the United States. Based on this scenario, we could achieve a reduction of logistic costs of $15.1 ton, and this is what has to be done to get this scenario. For gaps, the gap scenario, we work on closing the gap between average yield and the best yield, or which is achieved by the best 25% of the farmers. This is the gap we're closing. How do we do this? How do we close the gap? Well, considering that with the more investments in technologies, the better yields. And this is what we see along all the seasons. Better technological packages translate into higher yields. And this is the driver to close technological gaps. Also, different kind of gaps increase as we move away from the core areas, the crop areas. And what we see is that wheat, out of the 6 we studied, has a larger gap. This is the crop that obtains the highest yield, 16.3%. And this is what we consider in this yield gap. And the final yield scenario that I would like to show is we close the gap between average yield and potential yield, which is reaching 80% of the potential yield of the crop in the area. This is based on an international initiative, so we consider this as the 80% of this is the gap we have to close. We have gaps in the different regions across the country, and wheat again has the largest gap of yield, together with maize, so with corn, and this is the driver we're including in this potential scenario. To summarize, 3.3 is what we're estimating in the grain exchange. 3.8 is the GRAP scenario, and 4.4 the potential scenario. These seem to be high yields, but they are not very high compared to what we did, as you know, the Argentina did in the country. Once we define the scenarios, let's have a look at the results and projections for 2028 and 2029. And before moving into production, let's have a look at the two main drivers: what's going to happen to the area and yields. In this chart, we can see that annual growth rates in yields in the oranges circles. You can see they are above the gray circles. For all of the scenarios, we have an increase of the yields compared to the seeded areas or the planted areas. This will explain the growth rate in Argentina. This also takes place in the baseline scenario. In that scenario, yields have a greater increase. For the potential scenario is where we, with increased rates, actually grow a lot. These are high rates, but not as much if we compare to the ones that Argentina obtained in the last 10 years. The rate was 2.5%. So now let's have a look at production. 28-29 season, 19 million tons, record production of wheat in Argentina, which is the production that we'll be getting in 28-29, baseline. A production of 23.3. If we continue with the same policies and trends, then we'd have an increase of 19 or 20% increase. So this increase will be much larger in scenarios where we include more technological advancements and infrastructure. We could be even reaching 27 million tons or 34 million tons of wheat production in Argentina in the potential scenario plus logistics. This growth is about 23% as long as continuity is in place, and this rate could double and triple if we move along, or if we continue working on the agenda to adopt technologies so we can actually close technological gaps. Each of these scenarios has responses in exports which are associated that will respond. For example, baseline in 28-29, probably 16 million tons of exports, and the rest of the scenarios, for example, gaps, if we close the gaps that we have today, and improvements in logistics, about 20 million tons of exports of wheat in Argentina. Some final remarks of this presentation. So we can say is that wheat plays a key role. The wheat is here and to stay, is here for good in the Argentine production systems. Looking forward, it looks pretty promising. We could have 10 years of continuity and growth of wheat production in Argentina, 23% increase that will enable to increase exports. Potential is even greater. Accompanied by improvement in yields, by closing technological gaps across the regions of the country. And of course, there are some constraints, some probably new trade barriers, our own domestic policies that could become eventually constraints. But it is clear that there is an enormous public-private commitment to overcome these barriers, and this conference is a reflection of this.